Olá! Thank you for watching this video series on translation and technology brought to you by the Language Resource Center at the University of Michigan and the Corpus-Driven Terminology and Translation Research Group from the University of Brasília. My name is Elisa Duarte Teixeira, and this is what we are going to go over in this video. So in this video, we are going to talk about parallel corpora and how they can be used for translation. We are going to start by explaining why someone should use corpora for translation. And then we are going to go over some of the corpora that can be used for translation. On one side, we have the bilingual and multilingual corpora, but we can also use monolingual corpora as a source of information for translation. After that, we are going to explore some of the existing corpora that can be used for translation, starting by the parallel corpora. The first thing we ask when we want to start using a new technology or a new tool in our work is, why should I use that instead of other there are so many tools nowadays and applications and things that we could potentially use to do our job. Why should I use corpora to help me translate? The case for corpora is that when we are translating, especially if we are novice translators, or if we are starting to work in an area that we do not have a lot of knowledge of, we are starting in that area, we have never been trained in that specialized area. Even when we are native speakers of that language in that particular area, that doesn't mean that we have the phraseology and all the terms that people use in those texts. So the corpus, the collection of electronic texts, is going to help you to produce more accurate and texts that sound natural, that read as if they were written by someone that work in that area, the same other texts that these people are reading, written by people in the area. To give you an example here from cooking recipes, if we read in a translation half-sweet chocolate instead of semi-sweet chocolate, we could potentially understand, right? It's the same if you compare semi with half, they mean exact the same thing or very similar. Although in this particular context, we can only use semi-sweet if we want our text to be similar to the ones that circulate in English for recipes, right? So we are talking here about probability instead of possibility. Can I say half-sweet? You probably can. There's nothing in the language that prevents you from saying that, and there is nothing in the language that prevents people from understanding what we're trying to say. Although the best choice and the most probable to happen in a specialized text from this area, in a cooking recipe, it's going to be semi-sweet. So as translators, we are always looking for what's more probable and not only what's possible. Now, as I was saying before in other videos, if you are a specialist in a certain area, if you've been trained in that area and you've been trained as a translator and you are a native speaker of that language, good for you, because you have all the tools that you need to produce a wonderful translation in that area, in that language. But most of the cases, sometimes we are not native speakers of the language, and sometimes we are just starting to learn the vocabulary of that particular area, or even if we have been translating in that area for a long time, we still are not trained in that area. So we are not specialists of that area. So that's when corpora and texts similar to the ones that I want to produce in my target language, organized in a body of information that I can consult and check using my computer and some specialized software, is going to help me a lot. So I always like to say to my students and to other people that I talk about translation, that corpus is the translator's best friend, as I'm going to try to tell you and show you in the upcoming slides and videos in this series. Here's an example. If we look at a corpus of cooking recipes with 1.5 million words worth of recipes, and I type the word pepper, I will see in that particular corpus 1,178 occurrences of the word pepper. And when I type that in a search tool that was built to analyze corpus, such as Wordsmith Tools, which is this screen that you're seeing here, it's going to give me the concordances. Each one of this line is a context, and I can immediately, when I reorder this sentences, I can start seeing some patterns to form. For instance, I can see that salt and pepper is something that's used a lot. Of course, here I'm showing you I've changed here to show you some of the examples, but if you look at the 1,000 and almost 200 entries, you're going to see that repeating a lot. But we can also see that salt and black pepper happens a lot. But if we go a little further, we can also see that the verb season and the preposition with occurs very often on the left side. And we can also see if there is an adverb between the verb and the preposition. We can see well, generously, lightly. So the adverb is going to come between the verb and the preposition. We can also see that for black pepper, we have several collocates. That's how we call the words that co-occur on either side of the search word. We have cracked, we have ground, we have milled, we have freshly milled, so another adverb occurring very frequently on the left. We have other types of pepper, cayenne pepper, and for these ones we are going to use pinch instead of ground, for instance, or instead of teaspoons, tablespoons to measure it, because it's so strong, you use a pinch. And other forms of pepper like crushed pepper. Now let's have a look at some corpora for translation. So when we work with translation, we mostly are interested in two types of corpora, what we call parallel corpora and what we call comparable corpora. But we can also benefit a lot from using monolingual corpora, and usually in the language that is our target language. But there might be cases that even a monolingual corpus in our source language is also going to help us, especially if we are looking for the concept of a certain word, and if we are trying to learn a bit more about those terms and looking for definitions. That's when a monolingual corpus is going to help with translation. So let's have a look at all these different kinds of corpora and how can they help us as translators. So the bilingual or multilingual corpora, they are called parallel corpora when we have source texts aligned usually at the sentence level with their equivalent target language texts. So I have one text in one language and the translation that someone did for that one text, and they are aligned, they are side by side in the way that if I look for a word in one of them, I can see immediately on the side of it how this was translated or underneath, right? One example here, if I have 50 papers on hyperglycemia-induced insulin resistance in English, and then I have their corresponding translation in a certain language, in a second language. Comparable corpora are a little different. They usually are specialized corpora, and they contain texts that are similar in terms of size, number of texts, genre, text typology, and all. As much as possible, they are similar in composition, in time that it was produced, but they are not translation one of the other. So let's say I want to start translating cookbooks, and I put together a corpus of chocolate cake recipes. So I can collect, let's say, 100 recipes in English, and then around 100 recipes in Polish or Spanish. And if I start looking at these two corpora, I'm gonna see how there are some of the equivalent expressions and the procedures, how you prepare a cake in these two languages. And there might also be some things that there is one in one language and not in the other, because we are now looking at texts that were originally produced in that particular language. So they're not translation of each other. We are now going to have a look at some examples of existing corpora, more specifically parallel corpora. Here's the first example to show you a parallel corpus. It's called Compara. It's a Portuguese-English corpus of literary texts. And I've done a search here to show you a translation for the word saudades, which is, some people say, a word that's very particular of Portuguese language. So we can see in those first examples here that saudade has been translated in very different ways. So it's a source of information for translators, how you can translate that one word in very different ways depending on the context and your public and all that. Here's another example of parallel corpora, opus. In this screen here, I'm showing you a corpus of TED Talks, and I chose English and its translation into Croatian. So once you type a search word, and I type the word banana here, the asterisk is gonna let you search for all endings after where the asterisk is. And once I click the search, the website is going to return all the sentences that in which the word banana occurred in English and their translations into Croatian. So you have immediate access to the equivalents that were used in that particular translation. Another example of parallel corpora that I wanted to show you is the Cortrade. It's a corpus of technical and literary translations, and also journalistic. You can choose which one you want to work. And the difference of this corpus is that it has more than one version of the translations. It has the source language and 3 versions of the translated text. The first one done by the student, the second one revised by a colleague, and the last one revised by the faculty member that was translating this book. And if you look here, we have several translations for nod, which is a word that sometimes is hard to translate because it can mean so many things in a language like Portuguese that doesn't have any clear-cut equivalent for this word. On the multilingual side of things, there are several multilingual corpora nowadays available for consultation, and one that I like the best is Clarin. Here I'm just showing 2 languages, but you can put like 6, 7 languages side by side. And then you do a search and you just have to say the word that you are searching and what language you want it to be the departuring language. And once the computer locates those examples in that one corpus, it's going to show the equivalent sentences in all the other corpora. So there are several other corpora based, for instance, in the European Union documents that are freely available. And Cladding is an interesting one that I think you should explore. Here's an example of a multilingual corpus, Opus, which is part of the Opus corpus that I've shown before. But in this case here, I've chosen a corpus about OpenOffice, and I selected 4 of the 7 languages available. So I type my search in English, and the website is going to provide all the translations in those languages for those contexts containing the words that I searched, in this case, keyboard. So we have English and then German, French, Chinese, and Spanish. And finally, I thought that was interesting to show you as well, Sketch Engine, which is one of the most potent corpus tools available nowadays. And it offers both things. It offers you corpora that are readily available for you to explore, but it also lets you upload your corpus with the advantage of helping you with tagging, which means putting little tags in your words to say if it's a noun, it's a verb, that allows you to do very delicate and very specialized searches in your corpus. So Sketch Engine is also a very interesting tool if you're working with translation and parallel and also comparable corpora, which we are going to see next. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of working with parallel corpora? When we type a search and we see the equivalent, of course we have this very interesting contrastive insight about how languages can differ and how languages can also have so many things in common. And also you have a ready-to-use equivalent or equivalents that you can choose from and see which one adapts better to your new context. So it's immediately available to you how someone else translated that passage or that term into that language that you're working with. The question is, do you trust those translations? For instance, Lingui is one tool that a lot of people use to find equivalents. Some of the texts there are translations done by machine that some time ago when they were not as good. Some are done by non-trained translators. So how much can you trust that information? So that's something you have to take into consideration when you're using a parallel corpus. And the other thing is it's harder to put parallel corpus together because you have to have both texts, the source language and the target language texts. And sometimes you only have one of them, right? So parallel corpora are harder to find, and you have to be more careful when you collect them if it's something that you're going to trust and use the suggestions that are there. They also take more work to explore because you are looking at 2 or 3 or 4 languages at the same time. Here are some examples of multilingual corpora for you to have a look. And I hope you have fun exploring them. And next, we are going to have a look at some other types of corpora that can be useful in translation. I hope this content was useful to you. Please help us spread the word, and if you want to learn more about translation and technology, check the other videos in the series. Obrigada!